Dear friends, welcome to our channel A3 Stories. Please like, share and subscribe. An A3 Stories Together for Love by Shelley M. Part 1 of 4. Arfa, and her unborn child, and he was staking a claim on his woman and his child, unbeknown to Arfa. Happy reading, friends. Signing off. Chapter 1. The minute Shazane reached for her, Arfa was lost. How could she resist her husband? Scorching desire was like a rage in his blood. He wrapped her tightly in his embrace. Arfa flung her arms around his neck. His mouth met hers. The heated kiss had her melting against him. His warmth, which was penetrating each cell of hers. She felt agonizingly aware of each inch of him, as he was plastered to her as a second skin. She could feel him against her. A desperate ache arose in her to have him filling her, driving her crazy and propelling her into oblivion. While his mouth continued to create havoc with her senses, his hands slid down her back, over the curve of her bottom, and pulled her tight against him, extracting a moan from the depths of her. She'd never felt anything like this before. This primitive craving and complete abandonment of herself made her a slave to the crushing desire which was consuming her senses. As their kisses grew more heated and all-consuming, he slid the zip of her dress down and it fell in a pool of shimmering silk at her feet. She tugged at his shirt, but instead of tackling with a row of all the buttons, he pulled it over his head and took care of the rest of their clothes, removing all the barriers between them. Their hands caressed each other until they were both shaking with intense need. Arfa, I can't wait, he groaned against her mouth. Slightly pulling back from her, he stared down at her. His eyes were blazing with yearning. An equally intense desire echoed through her being, connecting with him on the same level. I don't want to stop you, she responded huskily, her color running high. The harsh desire echoing through her took her breath away. He began kissing his way down her neck. She felt his touch through her soul and let herself drown in the exciting sensations and tried to ignore the warning that she was with a child. Shazane lifted his head and looked at her, sensing her stillness. I am claiming this child as my own, and I promise I won't hurt him or you, he promised hoarsely. She couldn't find her voice and was emotionally moved by his caution to not hurt them even in the throes of passion. Trust me, he added. In response, she kissed him and moved back. That was all the answer he needed. Shazane settled his mouth on hers in a bone-melting kiss. Clawing desire crashed into her as he devastatingly assaulted and ravaged her heightened senses. She was seeking more of him and offering her abandoned response. As the kiss deepened, her fingers clutched his luxuriant hair, which he preferred to keep it slightly longer, and it reached below his collar. She pressed herself even closer to him. The heat of his mouth, the hardness of his body was pushing her to the edge. She waited desperately as he throbbed and ached for completion. He was intimately pressed against her, seeking acceptance, and she gave in to him with her heart and soul. Her heart was galloping. Shah, she whispered, distraught with craving. Her fingers dug into his shoulders. The desperate pleading in her voice reached Shazane, and his control had snapped. I know, my love, I feel it too, he murmured, bending his head and kissing her long and deep, enrapturing her so thoroughly that she thought she was about to pass out from delight. He joined them as one whole. She held him as if never wanting to let him go. He completed her, and it was an incredible feeling which she never thought possible. She felt alive and thoroughly loved. Her pulse raced, and she couldn't prevent her hips from arching up. Her hands found their way to his back, and she pressed him closer, tracing his muscles, biting on his shoulder to stifle her cries at the unbelievable sensations that she was drowning in, strong currents whisking her away to a land unknown, and suddenly she was in paradise. Her cries were muffled by his arduous kisses. Shazane meeting her at a plane as he lost control. She held him close as he collapsed on top of her, ensuring not to crush her. In the aftermath of their passion, the only sounds that they could hear was of their thundering heartbeats. She breathed shakily in awe of what she had experienced in his arms. She had died a little and gone to heaven. He gently pulled away from her and rolled onto his back. Are you okay? Did I hurt you? He was frowning down at her. No, you didn't. A sated smile curved her lips as she cuddled closer to him. Sure, he reconfirmed. Arfa felt her cheeks flame. We are both fine, I hope. I will have a doctor checkup aligned for you after our time together, he said, smiling down at her. Is that necessary? It would be so embarrassing. She replied, feeling self-conscious to share the cause behind the checkup with another soul. What we both shared is normal between husband and wife, and we are just being cautious about the health of our child. The doctors would be pleased that we are reaching them out to ensure the child's health. Okay, if you say so. Arfa acknowledged, feeling some of her embarrassment dissipate. She liked him referring to as their child. She had been on the family way when he had married her. But the way he referred to the child as his own was so like him. Shazane curled a lock of hair around his finger and tugged her head forward for a soul-shattering kiss. I just thought to remind you that I am around, and you were miles away lost in thoughts, he said when he eventually came up for air, hugging her close. She enjoyed his possessiveness after the intimacy they had shared. It was after all a unique experience for her. Her marriage to him was a simple affair and was for the sake of her child. As a mother, she wanted to give him the best life possible. She did what she had considered best for the child's future. To give him a strong family base, with 2 parents to love him. I was just thinking about you and all that you have done for both of us. Arfa referred to her child and herself. Not but all 3 of us, Arfa. You and the child are mine, and I have just proved it to you after marrying you. With God as our witness, I accepted you, and this is something I owed to my child. Yes, this baby is mine, he confessed, baring his soul to Arfa. Shock seized Arfa hearing his confession. She glanced up at him with incredulity. How is that possible? It was me all along who had decided to protect you and any child that you might carry from being transmitted with the fatal disease that my ailing brother had. Had you proceeded for what he had planned, it would have exposed you and the child to the same health risks. Sometime before his death, he came to see me about you. And before he could share everything with me, he fainted, which led me and the doctors to find out the truth about his terminal illness. He had not known the high risk factor that he represented for you and the child's health. I had intervened and stepped in, all the while letting him believe that he had fulfilled his father's dream of providing him with an heir he had coveted the most. I know it was wrong of me to conceal the truth from him, but he was a happy man at the time of his death, he said. You thought about your brother's happiness, and what about me? She asked him in disbelief. Feeling as if the walls were closing in on her, she dragged in a shaky breath. Did you think of what I would feel if I came to know about it? Was I not important enough to have known from the beginning who was the father of my child? I had fretted after the death of your brother about the future of the child I thought I carried for him, while all along I was kept in the dark about the actual father's identity. I agree I had never had any ties with him, but I had consented to have this child for your family as he had wished for me, through the help of surrogacy. She was deeply hurt, and coldness was seeping into her. Shazane lay back and stared up at the ceiling. I realized that I should have taken you into confidence before proceeding through it all, but my brother's deteriorating health had all my focus on him. I was told that he didn't have much time left to live, and we were running against time. It seemed only willpower kept him going, and once the news of your pregnancy was confirmed, he gave up. Shazane remembered the agony his brother was in, and he stood helpless, unable to save him. Arfa could feel his desolation from the huskiness of his voice. She knew death was final and his brother was not coming back. Shazane had tried to save her and her unborn child from the same disease that had his brother dying. He had mentioned that had his focus had not been entirely on saving his dying brother, he would have come to see her first. She confessed to herself. It was with great effort that Arfa pushed back the hurt that she initially felt at his disclosure. She was being her sensitive self. She hugged him, holding his face between her palms, her hair falling like a curtain enclosing them in a cloak. Shazane, don't think about the pain that he underwent, but the happiness he felt before leaving this world. That was the only thing he took with him to paradise, the happiness. Her words were soothing and had the calming effect like on his soul. Shazane saw her efforts. She had hidden the hurt that she had felt at his secrecy and was bent on making his sorrows disappear. Yes, he had fortunately found a rare woman as his wife. She sensed his pain and was doing her best to share the grief with him. You need a big heart to do that, and his wife certainly boasted owning one big enough to love deeply and forgive irrevocably. He confessed to himself, engulfing her in a warm embrace. You are right, and with you beside me, life will be no less than a paradise, and I want to take you to paradise again. He reached up to kiss her senseless, ensnaring her in his desire which she had managed to arouse in him again. A delirious need took over and she found herself hurtling down the slippery slope which took them to the ultimate heaven. Shazane listened to the soft sound of her breathing as she dozed in his arms, spent and replete. Her head lay on his chest, and her arm was flung across his stomach. Sleep, however, eluded him completely. He'd never felt more awake. He was just too in peace to sleep. He had been insatiable for his wife, and Arfa had responded to him in kind. He kissed her forehead and tucked her hair behind her ear. His mind rolled back to the time where it had all started a few months back. Together for Love by Shelley M. End of Part 1. Stay connected to watch Part 2. Do subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for receiving updates for all our new stories.